5:40 a.m. The Persian Gulf is swallowed by the pitch-black silence of the morning, exactly 34 miles off the Iranian coastline. The dark water is churning, boiling with the toxic black smoke and burning fiberglass of what used to be a highly touted Iranian speedboat swarm. Just 3 minutes ago, 60 heavily armed Iranian commandos thought they were about to execute the most humiliating ambush in naval history against the USS George H.W. Bush, a floating American city carrying 5,000 sleeping souls. Now, those same commandos are sinking to the bottom of the Gulf alongside their melted RPGs and shattered pride. The ocean surface is littered with the burning wrecks of their $50,000 boats, sliced into flaming halves by a relentless wall of American steel. If you think this was just a lucky escape for the US Navy, then stay focused, because how this morning actually unfolded is a terrifying masterclass in technological supremacy that made the enemy choke on their own arrogance. Let's rewind to 5:25 a.m. inside a staging facility hidden along the Iranian coast. The enemy had just launched a coordinated 12-boat swarm, deploying their $50,000 Blade Runner speedboats onto the dark water with supreme arrogance. 60 commandos, clutching cheap RPG-7 rocket launchers, were literally high-fiving each other over the roar of their outboard motors. They honestly believed their textbook swarm tactics and the chaotic dawn darkness would grant them the ultimate element of surprise. The commanders watching from the shoreline were already drafting their victory propaganda, convinced that their disposable fiberglass fleet was about to humiliate a $13 billion United States Navy supercarrier. The overconfidence was sickening as these small boats cut through the shallow waters at a breakneck 50 knots. But folks, here is the lethal error that the Iranian planners completely missed. A crucial detail only the sharpest tactical minds watching will catch. While those 60 commandos were busy dreaming of medals, they remained completely oblivious to the silent brain operating tens of thousands of feet above the Persian Gulf. They genuinely thought their cheap camouflage gave them the ultimate element of stealth. But if you ask why their surprise attack was doomed before their motors even warmed up, I will tell you a terrifying military secret. Hovering invisibly in the freezing air was an E-2D advanced Hawkeye, a $200 million airborne early warning aircraft packed with cutting-edge radar that had been tracking every single ripple and heat signature since the moment they left the dock. Down in the dimly lit Combat Information Center of the USS George H.W. Bush, there was absolutely zero panic, only cold calculation. The American officers were sipping coffee while computers calculated the most cost-effective way to sink them. The second act of this metallic torch party was just getting started, and the executioners were awake. The glowing red dots on the radar screen were multiplying rapidly as the Iranian swarm pushed past the 4-mile mark, their outboard engines screaming across the dark water. At this exact moment, the United States Navy was staring down the barrel of a brutal mathematical equation, a tactical nightmare that the Iranian planners mistakenly believed would paralyze the fleet. The Aegis combat system, essentially a digital god of war operating on the nearby Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, instantly processed the approaching threat and calculated the cost-exchange ratio in a fraction of a millisecond. This is where the sheer genius of American military doctrine takes over, because war is not just about explosions, it is about return on investment. The enemy wanted the US commanders to panic and push the big red button, launching a barrage of RIM 162 evolved Sea Sparrow missiles to obliterate the incoming boats, but shooting a staggering $1.2 million supersonic interceptor at a pathetic $50,000 fiberglass tub piloted by misguided commandos is a catastrophic financial trap. The Iranians were hoping to bleed the American missile magazines dry, forcing the carrier strike group to burn through tens of millions of dollars in advanced munitions just to swat away a swarm of noisy mosquitoes. It was an economic game of chicken, and the enemy commanders were grinning in their bunkers, absolutely convinced they had outsmarted the Pentagon. The tension on the bridge was palpable as the distance closed to 3 miles, the clock ticking down mercilessly while automated systems demanded a firing solution. The American officers knew that deploying multi-million-dollar countermeasures would let the enemy declare a massive strategic victory on state television, bragging about forcing the mighty US Navy to empty its wallet. If you were the commander of this billion-dollar strike group, watching a swarm of armed fanatics hurtling toward your hull at 50 knots, would you panic and launch your most expensive missiles? Or would you trust the cold, calculated logic of a machine that knows exactly how to break the enemy's bank account? The Iranians thought they had cornered the Eagle, assuming the Americans had to choose between absorbing the impact or going bankrupt. But wait, there is one more layer to this triple threat failure that the enemy never saw coming. And the physics of destruction in the next few minutes are about to change the entire calculus of naval warfare. Let us shift our perspective down to the freezing surface of the Persian Gulf, directly into the cramped cockpits of those doomed Iranian speedboats. The salt water was violently spraying across their faces as the Commandos tightly gripped their cheap, rusty RPG-7 launchers, their minds already aggressively envisioning the glorious explosions they were about to inflict on the American infidels. They were closing the distance fast, pushing past the 3-mile mark, and still, the colossal $13 billion American supercarrier loomed silently in the dark, not firing a single kinetic weapon in response. To the arrogant Iranian squad leaders barking orders over their unencrypted radios, this deafening silence from the United States Navy was absolute proof of American cowardice and systemic paralysis. They actually believed their high-speed swarm tactic had completely overwhelmed the digital brains of the US fleet. Time to impact was now ticking down past 90 seconds. You could practically hear the premature celebrations echoing across the waves, the Commandos literally high-fiving each other over the deafening roar of their outboard motors, convinced they were seconds away from achieving the most spectacular naval kill of the 21st century. These overconfident fighters genuinely thought they were the apex predators of the shallow waters, hunting down a helpless, bloated leviathan. They were already drafting the headlines for their state-run media, calculating how their $50,000 fiberglass toys had mathematically checkmated the greatest military superpower on Earth. But normal viewers might just see a pack of aggressive underdogs closing in for a lucky strike. However, those of you with sharp tactical minds who are watching this unfold will immediately spot the fatal flaw in their pathetic enthusiasm. You know that when a multi-billion-dollar American strike group goes completely silent while under attack, they are not panicking. They are simply locking the door to the slaughterhouse. Stay focused, because the physics of destruction in the next 30 seconds is about to brutally educate these arrogant commandos, and the thermal truth is about to get very, very loud. Let the timer hit 60 seconds to impact. The Iranian commandos were practically close enough to read the hull numbers on the USS George H.W. Bush, their adrenaline pumping as they prepared to unleash a barrage of cheap rocket-propelled grenades. But here is the genius detail that the Iranian planners completely missed, a lethal error in understanding modern American warfighting. The United States Navy does not just fight with bullets, they fight with the electromagnetic spectrum. At exactly 3 miles out, the carrier strike group played its invisible trump card. Instead of wasting multi-million-dollar kinetic interceptors, the advanced ANSLQ 32V6 electronic warfare system aboard the carrier silently projected heavily concentrated beams of high-intensity jamming frequencies directly into the oncoming swarm. It was an absolute digital massacre. In a fraction of a second, the encrypted communication network of the entire Iranian assault force was brutally choked out, turning their headsets into a chaotic symphony of deafening static. The squad leaders were screaming into dead microphones, instantly cut off from their coastal command centers. But the invisible slaughter did not stop there. The over-the-horizon radars of the Iranian C-802 anti-ship missile batteries operating on the distant shorelines were completely blinded, their screens washed out by American digital dominance, rendering their multi-million-dollar coastal defense grid entirely useless. The attackers were now deaf, blind, and completely isolated on the open water. Most people would just see boats slowing down in confusion, but the true tactical experts watching this will immediately recognize the terrifying beauty of absolute spectrum control. And while the enemy was desperately trying to reboot their frozen GPS modules, the true angel of death was already circling above them. A stealthy F-35C Lightning II, An apex predator of the skies was silently orbiting nearby without emitting a single radar wave. It was utilizing its revolutionary AN/AAQ-40 electro-optical targeting system to passively suck in the thermal signatures of the boat engines, painting a razor-sharp targeting grid over the entire swarm. The invisible fighter jet was seamlessly streaming this flawless kill data down to the surface fleet through a secure data link, essentially handing the executioners a perfect map of the blind wolves. The trap was fully set, the prey was mathematically locked in, and the American gunners were merely waiting for the perfect financial moment to strike. Stay with me, because the final move is not a warning shot across the bow, and the execution is going to be spectacularly violent and precise. The distance violently collapsed to exactly 2,000 yards, putting the blind and deaf Iranian swarm directly inside the kill box of the absolute pinnacle of American point defense lethality. The automated Phalanx close-in weapon system, a terrifying robotic executioner mounted on the carrier sponsor, finally woke up, its quantum-tier computers calculating firing solutions hundreds of times per second. At 1,300 yards, the psychological warfare ended, and the physical eradication began. The Phalanx unleashed a solid wall of depleted uranium, spitting out 20mm armor-piercing rounds at a devastating rate of 4,500 per minute. It sounded like a mechanical beast tearing through the fabric of reality, turning the peaceful morning air into a superheated chainsaw of kinetic energy. There was absolutely zero chance for the cheap aluminum and fiberglass hulls of the $50,000 Blade Runner speedboats to survive this mathematical slaughter. In less than 3 seconds, the front 3 boats were literally sawed in half, instantly exploding into massive fireballs of vaporized fuel and shredded Iranian propaganda. But wait, there is one more layer to this synchronized symphony of death. While the CIWS was actively deleting the Vanguard, 2 FA-18E F Super Hornets thundered down from the clouds like avenging angels, strafing the flanks of the disorganized swarm with their own M61A2 Vulcan cannons. Every single trigger pull was an exercise in extreme financial efficiency, utilizing cheap, basic ammunition to completely dismantle the enemy's multi-million-dollar tactical dream. The remaining Iranian commandos, who just minutes ago were high-fiving over their guaranteed victory, were now screaming in absolute terror as their brothers were vaporized in a merciless crossfire. United States Marines stationed along the carrier catwalks simultaneously opened up with M.240B medium machine guns, weaving an impenetrable net of tracer fire across the water surface. Stay focused, because the survivors of this initial metallic wave were desperately trying to turn their boats around, aggressively slamming their throttles in a humiliating retreat. The sheer technological shock of the American response was so overwhelming that the arrogant swarm psychology instantly shattered into a pathetic scramble for survival. The slaughter was mathematically perfect. In exactly 7 minutes and 40 seconds, the $13 billion American strike group completely neutralized the threat without a single U.S. sailor getting a scratch. 31 humiliated commandos were pulled from the burning wreckage as prisoners. The U.S. Navy didn't fire one single multi-million-dollar missile, saving taxpayers a fortune. But if you ask why this retreat is worse than death, I'll tell you an unbelievable military secret. The surviving speedboats, desperately limping back to the coast, were not escaping. They were leading the Grim Reaper straight home. The electronic warfare systems aboard the USS George H.W. Bush did not just jam the Iranian communications. They aggressively downloaded their entire encrypted protocol and mapped every hidden frequency used by their coastal defense grid. By the time the sun fully broke over the horizon, American intelligence had triangulated the exact GPS coordinates of every single C-802 missile battery and underground command bunker. The U.S. Navy successfully turned a tactical ambush into a free intelligence gathering operation, painting a massive digital bullseye on the enemy's billion-dollar infrastructure. Now, a fleet of Tomahawk cruise missiles is silently waiting for the green light to permanently erase those facilities. Their swarm tactic was humiliated, and their bases are locked in the crosshairs. If you were the Iranian commander tomorrow morning, would you launch another wave or pack your bags? Let me know the next move of a true grandmaster in the comments below.